the International Organization for Migration, IOM, has expressed concern that many young Nigerians are still ignorant of the dangers of illegal and irregular migration known as the Japa syndrome. According to the youth focal person of IOM, Hajiya Aisha Dahiru, though migration is their right, the channels which most young people use are the issues.
She said the IOM is partnering with the International Alert, AYGF, to see that youth-centered approaches such as policy making, innovative and awareness, alerting people on the dangers of irregular migration. This morning on Breakfast Central, we're joined by IOM Nigeria Chief of Mission, Laurent Debic. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
All
It's
right.
a pleasure.
This is an ongoing conversation, not just in Nigeria, around the continent. We've seen mass migration of young people, unfortunately, through irregular routes. So in light of the growing trend of Nigerian youth migrating to Europe, how would you assess the effectiveness of the current awareness campaigns about the dangers of irregular migration and the lack of valid passports?
Well, I would say if we look at the last years and the fact that we have communicated as an organization institutionally to the youth, I would say that these campaigns can be considered as a failure, considering that the number is increasing. I think the most effective way to communicate to the youth is the youth themselves. And that's why we are now working much more with the people who have been experiencing this irregular migration, and then giving them a voice, speaking about the journey and what they went through might be the most efficient way to persuade the others that there are other ways. When we support those who have failed their journey irregularly, who have been abused by smugglers and traffickers, and organize themselves in groups in looking at opportunities in the country, they realize how much less investment they can give to actually succeed in the country compared to what they had to pay a smuggler to pass and cross a border. So we have to emphasize the role of the youth themselves and give them actually a voice, more strength, their capacity to take the future in their hands and provide them with that support instead of talking ourselves about it. So it's extremely important we look at the grassroots organizations to discuss and create debates among the youth and reach them to see how they see their future, identify what they need, and then work on those aspects.
Well, it might be, pretty tough, because now we're talking about the messaging and how effective it has been, but the realities of the average Nigerian, I'm sure that, is something that they also consider before they make these moves and take these very, very high risk journeys. The last couple of days, we've seen people, on boats, finding themselves some places in Brazil and the likes. So how do you battle with the concept of Nigerians and the reality that they have and the imagined greener pasture that they have or they expect to see in the West and in other countries that they are fleeing to? How do you battle between those two concepts while, of course, trying to convince, these persons to, of course, stay back home?
There are two main aspects, indeed, that you mentioned, the green pastures. I think it's a belief and it's manipulated through the media and used by the smugglers to attract clients, if I may say, for them to pay their services. So those green pastures are not that green. And I think we have to look at and pass information on the fact that there is a global recession and unemployment is actually not mentioning the fact that in most of the cases they may be exploited and abused. And so the money that they are supposed to earn might be taken by smugglers. That's one important aspect. But the most important, I think, is to give an alternative. Because you may talk for hours and years about they are more powerful than others, that they are the ones selected, and that they will succeed. But if you don't give them an alternative, they will continue to think so. Because the next question of don't go, it's dangerous, is and then what? What do I do? So it's really important that we look at opportunities and we disseminate information about possibility of success. For this, it's an action which requires all of the society involvement. We cannot only and exclusively look at the government to find alternatives. Government has to indeed put in place systems for creation of jobs. But we cannot just transfer our responsibility or the responsibility of as an individual to an institution. As a person, I must take my future in my hands and look at what I have to do. So if the government, for example, has to facilitate access to education, not necessarily high education, but technical education, it's also necessary to look at how this education and those skills will be employed in the society. Civil servant is not the only solution. The private sector is another institution which needs to be on board. Working with them, looking at how the skills can correspond to the market, the labor market needs, is essential. And once we have these in place and the commitment by the state to facilitate access to education and technical vocational training, but as well the private sector looking at how they can employ those, we need to disseminate this information. There is a huge lack of information among the youth. How can we combat together the fact that smugglers can penetrate the society and disseminate information to attract youth while we do not succeed? That's where we should ask the question. How can we go through the communities which are it and who believe that there is a future outside with information on possibilities, sharing success, passing information of those who have made those steps and who have succeeded. We cannot believe that the dream of everybody would be to be, I don't know, director tomorrow morning. I don't think this is ever feasible. It might be on television, might be if it's too, I always say, if it's too beautiful to be true, it might be too beautiful to be true. So we all have to look at how we can invest ourselves, but we must, as institutions, government, private sector, civil society, the community themselves, the traditional leaders, the grassroots organizations, have all one objective, is to disseminate the right information, valuing the people, the role, civil and the economic and social role that the youth can have in society, but certainly by giving them opportunities to actually understand that they have a crucial role. If you look globally, it's said on all indicators that Africa is the continent of the future. So we actually, if we look for the next 2 decades, we believe that Africa will actually attract workers. It's already the case. A lot of enterprises and businesses in Africa, and it's the case in Nigeria, big enterprises are not finding the labor forces that they need to grow. So this is something that the youth has to know. Enterprises in Nigeria are in need of them. But if they never know, if we never communicate to them what type of skills those businesses are looking for, they will continue to look abroad.
All right.
So it's essential for Nigeria to grow, to find among themselves the appropriate skills.
What we're seeing now as well is several modes of migrating. Some are going irregularly, some are going through school. Uh, it's the month of August. In another month, thereabouts, schools are going to open in session abroad, and we're going to see a number of young people living in their numbers. What can the Nigerian education system do? How can we ensure that we, make it more conducive for more Nigerians to maybe school here and even get, more foreigners to come back and school in Nigeria? But if we're being realistic, a number of these plans are long-term plans. So beyond creating awareness, are there any immediate stopgap solutions that we can effect in place to ensure that we reduce the extent of migration?
I think acquiring skills abroad is a totally justifiable approach for the youth. Attractiveness of them coming back is quite important. And in a lot of conversation we have with students or those who have actually studied abroad and do not come back, the conditions of work have been mentioned as one reason for them to actually look first abroad in employment after being educated. So the level of wages, the conditions and the investments in the conditions of work is essential, and that's certainly a role that the government can do in partnership with the private sector. So that's certainly essential. Another is looking at the current situation of global issues. Nigeria is facing important challenges in terms of managing resources. We see in a lot of states situations where population are fighting for access to resources such as land, but particularly water. Environment and climate change is an essential field of work. Investing in green economy, in changing and proposing new types of employment, which might be self-employed, small and micro enterprises, should be promoted to make understanding the youth on the role they can play. And it can start with very small businesses of recycling, waste management, forestation, farming, irrigation, all these which are around a very important sector, agriculture, but not necessarily to go and farm in the fields, but what is around this important sector for the country. So again, information on those needs, on the labor market needs related to green economy, might be an opportunity that today may employ thousands of people and make benefits for them individually, but as well as a country.
Yeah, well, I think the challenge, to some extent, I probably need to do my own survey. It's not, the lack of ideas, with agriculture, with science and technology, and all of that. I think it's just a lack of faith in the future that Nigeria as a country holds. And, like my colleague has said, a lot of times these are long-term plans. A lot of them go in there, under the guise of going to school. A lot of times have almost no plans of returning back home to work. It's a step that they have to take in order to find greener pastures, like I said. And so it must be really tough to convince the average Nigerian to have faith. But that wouldn't be for you. That's not your role here. I'm asking. I stated that already, but I was asking that if you could share some of the security challenges, the risk that Nigerians have had to deal with, that you've monitored in the last long while, that Nigerians have had to deal with just because they're trying to leave Nigeria. Those who, of course, have been found on the Mediterranean Sea. Those who have been found on ship rudders in faraway away places. Those who have, of course, found themselves in Libya, for example, in the slave trade. What are some of those reports that you've gotten?
Yeah, so as IOM, we have network of offices all over the world. So it means that any migrants, and let's focus on Nigerians, can approach our offices when they in their journey they face. So we indeed receive requests from an important number, several thousands of Nigerians who have attempted to go to Europe. So if we can, the best scenario would be that they have left their states, went to one of the important cities, basically Lagos, Edo State, or Abuja, where you have persons there promoting the fact that they can facilitate their entry in a country. Basically, this is against money, so they have to pay a certain amount, and they are promised to be able to reach the shore of Italy, France, UK. What is not mentioned is the fact that they have to go through Niger or to go through Libya. And the amount that they had paid, which was supposed to reach them, to allow them to reach Europe, allows them to reach only Niamey, Agadez, for example. It's in that place that then they are requested to pay more. But obviously they don't have that amount with them. In Libya now, to cross the border, the sea, the smugglers may ask up to 5,000 euros. So those persons are facing an issue. They have done like half the journey, and they have now to start working. And that's where actually the nightmare starts, because they have to go through work, through exploitation. All those employers know very well that they have no other choice. So they will end up in doing work for very little amount, being exploited. And that would be the best case scenario. Unfortunately, the vast majority, if not all, of the women have to go through sexual exploitation. they may have no choice, but others also are actually not smuggled, but trafficked with that, so that purpose. So it's not that they have actually the intention to bring them to greener pasture, but it's actually to bring them to a situation where they will be exploited. So from the very beginning, the intention of the traffickers then would be to exploit them.
All right.
So when they come to our office and ask for support, we are meeting with people who have lost not faith in the country anymore. They have lost faith in themselves. Their self-esteem is at minimum. They have no capacity to face and to meet again their parents or those who have actually paid for them because they failed. So we have to rebuild their personality, their self-esteem, in addition to bring them with the skills and the capacity to actually take their life back in their hands, come back to the country and start up a business. And these people, I think, they merit our admiration because they do so. They start from zero, facing their past.